It's been 2.5 years since we've had a studio album from the Bee Gees. The last one was Spirits Having Flown. Is there any particular reason why it's been 2.5 years?
First of all, it's been about 11 months working on this album. And we do tend to work an awful long time on our albums because we want to be sure. For that reason alone, I would say that's why the space was there. The other space was, of course, the Streisand album, which we felt we were being present by placing our material through her and having the success that she did have with it. That's really it. That's really the space you're talking about, approximately 2 years.
That album did keep you in the charts for most of 1980, and another one which was there was your Greatest Hits album, which was a double, which went to number one. Were you expecting a number one with the Greatest Hits?
Oh, we never really expect our success, because you can't expect it, you can't demand it. You just work as hard as you can and hope that it works. And when the Greatest Hits album came out, we thought about it the same way as everything else. We worry about everything we do, even long after it's out, you know. So the Greatest Hits album had already been out. Everyone had heard all that material, but it was nice to see that it did well.
I think any album you put out that's got your name attached to it, of course, is a great thrill. I think what a lot of people must understand about the Bee Gees now is that we're no longer just a group that records and writes their own music every time they bring an album out, but we fill a criteria of different things. We are a production team. We write for other people. We did before Barbra Streisand, Samantha Sam, for instance, and people like that. Frankie Valli and Yvonne Elliman, of course, Love Me, which of course was a very big hit in the United Kingdom.
We are actually sitting in Middle Ear Studio, which is your studio in Miami, Florida. Yeah. And I'm wondering, would you have had the freedom to take that long had it not been your own studio? This must help you in that regard.
We would have taken that long. It would have been exceedingly expensive, but that's the name of the game. That's what you've got to do. The main difference here is that we can get what we need ourselves. We can just get it. Secondly, we've got more space in the soundproof room, which is an element that may not seem important, but is incredibly important when you're a group. There's never enough room to come and sit down in the soundproof room and listen. Well, now we have enough room. You can get a 30-piece band in there, you know. Not that we want one, but you can get one in there. Yeah. The main element is that when that board closes down at night...
The control room.
Yeah. The console. It's the same the next day when we come in. It's not been given to somebody else to spend 8 hours with. You know how you book time in a studio, and when you leave, someone else takes over and you're in the same studio. You have to come back the next day if you're doing the same hours again the next day and repatch that whole board, get it all set up again to record your music and not someone else's.
Plus you have the privacy as well of relaxation, taking the time off to relax when you want it.
You did have 3 American #1 singles off of Spirits Having Flown, which was an internationally successful album, and that actually extended your #1 streak in the States to 6. Does success of that magnitude put pressure on you which is almost paralyzing in the sense of inhibiting future creativity?
Well, we felt the most pressure in our lives following Saturday Night Fever. Yeah. Having to record an album like Spirits Having Flown after Saturday Night Fever, whether or not to include more falsettos, to go completely falsetto, or to switch completely 180 degrees. It is very difficult, and the pressure is enormous, but you have to start dismissing the pressure. In other words, you have to start thinking, I don't want to think about the pressure. We're going to record our music as we always have. What we did last, we must try and better this time. And if we try to stay within that narrow area that we all 3 of us know where we should be going, then the pressure doesn't really apply. We knew how much we had to do this time. We knew it was going to take us a year. Yeah. And we talked about the fact that, no, we're not going to spend a year on the next album. It's ridiculous. But we have ended up doing it again.
Now that it's become clear that the tremendous success of Saturday Night Fever did not typecast you as a disco group or a falsetto singing group, I can ask you, how long were you afraid that it might?
Whatever songs that we did for Saturday Night Fever, people will actually call disco records because they're with a disco film. In our minds, we know those songs will stand on their own outside disco.
Yeah, basically, in our own minds, even if it's ego, those songs are good songs.
Now and again, there are things where radio stations in this country, in the United States, have dropped their disco format apart, with the exceptions of Bee Gees songs from the disco era, when I'm saying, and from Fever, which they consider as exceptions to the rule, which is a great compliment.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I must add that when the film was being made, Saturday Night Fever, we knew nothing about it, and those songs that went to Saturday Night Fever were actually being recorded in France.
Yes.
We knew nothing about disco music anyway. We were just making our new album, and we were getting on writing Night Fever and Staying Alive with very little knowledge of disco music, as anyone had. How Deep Is Your Love was the furthest ring of a disco record, and yet that was the first #1 record from the film, and actually before the film came out. So it really, one can say, it's the success of the movie did not really spur How Deep Is Your Love to #1.
But our own view is you've got to be fair to everything. You've got to be fair to all music. There were good disco records, and there were good disco songs.
However, they were called disco songs because of Saturday Night Fever. When we wrote them, we didn't call them disco songs because we didn't know about Saturday Night
No,
Fever.
they were just high energy.
Yeah,
pop, you know.
If Saturday Night Fever, the film, had not been made, and they did not go to Fever, it would have been the product of our new studio album at that time, and it might have been called any name.
They're kicking their heads with it.
Yeah, whatever the title of the album might have been, those songs would have been on it. Who knows the degree of success that the songs without the film
the
fueling
film.
the songs and the songs fueling the
It was
film,
a
whatever
great
the
marriage.
marriage.
You did have the tremendous sales success resulting from that, the
Yeah,
biggest album of
unbelievable.
all time, almost 30 million, I believe.
Yeah.
And, of course, a lot of money is grossed and netted from that. Does that enable you to extend your artistic
Well,
interests?
we become more fortunate than the average artist, and in that way we get to be able to do virtually anything we want sound-wise. All we have to do is be creative. All we have to do is think of what sound we want, and we can probably get it. And that's where the money helps us. What we do with our money is we put it back into what we do.
Another thing you were doing in the year of the great success of Saturday Night Fever was producing Brother Andy,
Yeah.
and you are no longer doing that. And
Well, no, that's not to say we won't do that. I mean, it's just at this point in time, we got so bogged down with the other projects, and Andy went to live in LA, that everything sort of fell by its way quite naturally. And the time that's taken us to do the things we've been doing, I think we'll obviously, if there's an Andy album to be done, I'm sure that they'll come to us and say, are you ready to do another album? And we'll answer them at the time, depending on what else is happening. But right now it seems that Andy's caught up in about 40 shows, which is solid gold, television show solid gold. And God knows when he's going to be doing an album, you know. He seems to be riding a different crest altogether, and I think that's great. He's getting a lot of experience.
someone with whom you worked on the Andy album are Carl Richardson and Aldi Gluten.
Oh, yes.
They've been with you for 6 years.
Yeah.
Now how has this relationship grown?
Well, splendidly.
There's a great
It's,
deal of respect between all of us.
yeah.
They're very, very, Carl is a genius with sounds and engineering, and there's
Well,
no words
you
to
know,
describe what he does. But
You call whoever is involved with us making it behind that board is particularly brilliant in some respect or another. You know, Albie is very astute at arrangements and band arrangements, and he writes music and
synthesizers.
and synthesizers and all these things that you know, our meek little brains don't quite pick up on quite the same way. We come from a creative attitude completely, so we don't have much to do with electronics and things like that. Carl is our engineer extraordinaire. He's particularly brilliant at doing that, and that is basically it. We're a good team together, you know. And there's Dale Peterson, our other engineer. All these people are very, very, you know, smart at what they do.
Some fans in Europe are wondering why you have not appeared live outside the United States since 1974.
Well, the reason for that, Paul, is that we have been very involved in recording expansions career-wise since 1974, since the Main Course album. And we've been very, very occupied, or preoccupied with recording right up until that time, although we have done small tours of the US, one in 76 and the last being in 79. We've always been of the mind that when we do a tour of the world and taking in Europe, that it has to be on a world level. Definitely next year we'll do the United Kingdom.
And of course, I wonder then for who will be playing with you, because you've dissolved the old Bee Gees band, haven't you? The one that was with you for several years.
Well, like we did
choose
with this
musicians,
album,
yeah.
we chose the musicians for this album, the best that we could possibly get, and we believe we got the best, and they've all proved that.
I don't
we
think-
would pick them again for tour, I guess.
There were three prime musicians that we always had, and that was Blue Weaver at keyboards, Dennis Bryan drums, and Alan Kendall lead guitar. Those are the only three musicians that we're talking about. There wasn't any more of a band than that. And when we used to go on tour, we used to add musicians, so we usually ended up with about 15 on stage.
Right.
In addition to not doing too many live concerts recently, you've also cut back on television, because you used to be in the mid-'70s on American television quite a lot, and check me if I'm wrong, but recently not at all.
Not at
That's
all.
right, not at all, which is
It's part of our policy.
part of our policy not to do television. Television and rock music don't go together. It's a very, very bad marriage, because the sound systems at all major networks are not geared for music. They have this sort of one voice system, which is really for talking and one voice singer. And when you get a group singing or a band, all you get is distortion. That's why they have a lot of FM outlets, sometimes coupling up with some of the late night shows. Not only that, but the sound is still bad, because a lot of people just don't follow that route.
When you do appear visually, either on your album jackets or in whatever comes over in videos to Europe, you do have your image of the windswept hair, white suits or leather jackets, the hairy chest. Now, is this something you want to see as a continuous image, or is
No.
it something you want to change?
Well, I think
so.
you have to have a visual image,
Yes.
but providing you've made that impression, you don't have to thrash everybody with it. You know, I mean, for instance, on our new album, we're all wearing jackets. We all look pretty straight. You know, we're not dressed in white tight pants and jewelry and all that business. And we never quite saw that as the case, although obviously that is the case.